Hey everybody, it's Global Politics with Jim Martin. Today I want to do an update on Ukraine. On the ground, the Russians have been engaged with a summer offensive of sorts that approaches attacks from two directions on the ground. One is the north around Kharkiv, and another one is directed out of the territory that they've possessed in Donetsk. It's a slow, grinding approach, artillery, human wave attacks, guys on motorcycles charging the front lines, lots of drones. The Russians, as to this point in the war, have had at least 1 million casualties and are losing folks in their armed services at something like 1,000 folks per week. Those kind of losses seem incredible to us. There was like 2 weeks, maybe 3, during the entire Vietnam War where we lost 1,000 soldiers at a time. And the Russians have been doing this for months, if not a couple of years now. At the same time, they still have the population to sustain that. They continue to grind through their population, killing off their 18 to 34-year-olds. The Ukrainians have responded with adroit counterattacks, slowed these advances to a crawl. They're on the defense, which means that they essentially have about a 3-to-1 advantage. They're also much more tactically adept than the Russians are. Russians have lost a ton of officers, including some very senior folks over time, not only to falling out of hospital windows, but also to actually being killed on the front. In the air, both countries continue to use drones and missiles to great effect. Russia has steadily ramped up production of Iranian licensed Shahed drones. They also continue to use ballistic missiles and glide bombs to hit mostly civilian targets, hospitals, apartment blocks, shopping centers, some transportation infrastructure, electrical infrastructure. We don't hear as much about Russian attacks on Ukrainian military installations and formations and things. I assume that they probably are having some success there, but the Ukrainians play this very close to the vest. The other part of it is that the Ukrainians have arranged their Western air defenses in such a way as to protect those assets as best they can, while simultaneously providing some measure of protection to the civilian population heretofore. I'll get back to that in a little bit. The drone attacks in particular have picked up quite a bit in the last few months. There's been several of the largest drone attacks. Hey folks, it's Global Politics with Jim Martin. Only 10% of the folks who watch my videos are actually subscribed. If you could, take a minute and subscribe to my channel. It helps me to grow the channel and provide the kind of timely, in-depth analyses that you've come to enjoy and that I enjoy putting on for you. If you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks a lot and have a great day. In the entire war coming out of Russia in the last couple months, and it seems like they've really kind of gotten into a rhythm with their production there. At the same time, their guidance systems are not anywhere near what a Western guidance system might be, or even a Ukrainian guidance system. Ukraine, on the other hand, has used their drones to attack strategic and tactical level military targets almost exclusively. Accidents happen. Russian air defense installations, oil and natural gas facilities, military stockpiles, transportation networks like train systems, and most dramatically, the Russian strategic bomber fleet in that spiderweb operation about 6 or 8 weeks ago. How long ago was that? They've also made some strikes on naval assets and even shot down Russian aircraft that are on patrol over the Black Sea using drones. Ukraine has also begun to sparingly and carefully use the F-16s that the West has delivered to them, mostly in ground support roles, but also they've shot down a few Russian aircraft too, mostly around the front lines. Again, sparing, careful. They don't have that many of them, and each loss is of immense propaganda value to the Russians, of course. That said, Apparently, they're learning their tactics, they're doing well, they're making progress, and they've even been able to establish air superiority a few times for some moments over areas where they could provide ground support to their troops. And so that's exciting development. There's also a deadly shadow war going on in Russia, in Ukraine, of course, and in Europe. Russia is engaged in sabotage, arson attacks, and targeted killings in many of the European countries that are allied with Ukraine. These sorts of attacks are to probe for weaknesses. You see also some strategy going on in the Baltic with the shadow tanker fleet. Ukraine has responded by sabotaging and attacking some of those oil tankers that are operating under Russian control to export their oil. Essentially, both these countries know each other extremely well. The Ukrainians appear to have had a greater amount of success in securing their intelligence networks and have been able to really suss out a lot of things about where Russian troop movements are happening, where supplies are coming from, what time trains are arriving, and able to launch that spiderweb operation across the depth and breadth of the entire span of Russia, which is an incredible feat. On the diplomatic front, it's clear now that in the wake of the election of Donald Trump, Europe has begun to ramp up arms spending and support for Ukraine for their own purposes, to defend themselves and to prepare themselves for the end of NATO, and also in case of Russian attack, and to support Ukraine. However, the United States has not allocated any further monies to Ukraine, and the funds allocated by Congress under the Biden administration are long gone. The rare minerals deal between the United States and Ukraine was supposed to pave the way for Ukraine to be able to buy weapons, but the Trump administration has almost totally suspended arms sales, including, most critically, Patriot missiles, but also 155 millimeter ammunition. Those shells are the most used amongst all of them. The Patriot missiles are extremely critical because when you're getting attacked by drones and ballistic missiles, there's really no other way to take these down. The absence of enough of those missiles in Ukraine is costing civilian lives. Trump occasionally signals frustration with Putin. Even today, it seems to be just words. At best, Trump has no real interest in NATO or Ukraine pursuing an America First strategy. At worst, he's actively helping Russia. Peace negotiations have gone nowhere beyond prisoner exchanges because Russia has no interest in peace. They're in this for total victory. If they can't achieve that, they'll go until they collapse. They're committed, absolutely. Ukraine is similarly committed because they can't give up, because they know that Russia is an existential threat to their very existence as a country. God knows what would happen if Russia was able to conquer them. Despite the incredible difficulties and, in fact, failures of the Russian military in Ukraine, they also have the temerity to pressure Finland militarily through deployments and to press some deployments and exercises in Belarus that could threaten the Baltic states. They're not going to give up. They have a mentality. Everybody in the top leadership cadre, about 150 some odd people really, is of the same mindset, or worse, frankly. Sometimes people say, well, what would happen if Putin was deposed or assassinated or something? The next person would just step right in and do the same thing. Economically, Russia has used its familiarity with black markets to scrape and evade sanctions regimes, which are extensive. They use a lot of crypto, a lot of cyber attacks to extort various companies around the world. They have their illegal oil exports, their mineral exports, but the stresses are showing. Basically, they've sort of stopped collecting accurate economic data. It's hard to estimate exactly what's happening within Russia. Putin certainly isn't told anything that he does not want to hear. So it's going to be difficult for them. they also face a critical problem of essentially their economy is being sustained through military spending from the government. That creates, oddly enough, inflation, but it decimates other areas of their economy that could be productive in a peaceful situation. So when that money runs out, or when the war ends, whenever that happens to be, you can't sustain that because there's no tax revenue to get back up into speed. And you have all these people who are trained to do military jobs, not normal jobs. Difficult problem that is compounding week and month by month. So they have really cast their die on a risky bet in terms of their economy. That said, they've proven remarkably resilient. This war will continue for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. It could, depending on Russia's desperation, escalate in some way. Future events, critical things that we can't foresee, might also lead to an escalation, or potentially maybe some sort of negotiated peace. I really don't know what that might be, nor would I even hazard a guess. My best guess, a year from now, we're sitting in largely the same situation. The United States has, at best, ceded its influence to the Europeans and to Russia, really. We don't really have the initiative to be able to advance anything that might speed negotiations, bring this to a close, create a fair solution for Ukraine. Not a great situation, but we can say that the Ukrainians have continued to be incredibly resilient, incredibly brave, dedicated to the sovereignty of their country, and they're doing the absolute best they can under incredible circumstances. So these offensives will probably continue through October. Then you start to have rains and snow, and it becomes extremely problematic, and you kind of, both sides will settle more into a static situation. I hope that's interesting to you. Please subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Comments are welcome. Hit that like button, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.